back when I was a kid, we would take our fishing poles during the summer, and we literally fished all around the island. But it was more like Mayberry back
Right.
then. There just
Right.
weren't all the cars. You could even go on North Island because I was a Navy brat,
Yep.
and they had these big cattle buses that. Just like trailers, and so you could take them anywhere you want. So we fished all along the Quay Wall, all the way around to Zuniga Point.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it was. I have kids now, and my kids don't understand how lucky I was
Right.
to be able to do all that. So it was quite different, and the cars would just the cars would go over a ramp and go on to the ferry, and the ferry would take them to San Diego, and there were multiple ferries running, so usually it wasn't just one. You'd have one going one way and one going the other, but there was only one. I think there was only one dock. Maybe there was two.
Okay.
I have to look at a picture.
Okay. Now, before we get into how things changed with ferry landing, due to the big event in 1969 with the bridge coming in, I wanted to ask you about Coronado High School. Obviously, you were an islander. And what was Coronado High School like, back then versus the way it is now? And was it a, very small school like it is today, or obviously maybe even much smaller than it was today? But what was it like being a student at Coronado High School? If you have any memories you can share about that.
That's one regret that I have is I missed the old high school by 1 year. I was the first class in the new high school. That was 1963.
Okay.
And so we were so proud of ourselves. We tore down our totally wonderful old high school that looked like Riverdale High right out of the movies because we were going to build a modern, because we had air conditioning and no windows,
Right.
And it was this icky yellow, building. There was about 800 students. We didn't have COSA. And I will say one thing for the school today. The education system and Coronado Unified School District is just incredibly good today, and the kids. I mean, all the kids go to colleges. Back then, it was still a good place to go to school, but not the polished place that it is today. So I mean, it was fun going to school. School in a small town,
Right.
exactly what you would
You
expect.
knew everybody and
all
the
you.
friends.
Oh, of course. Well, everybody knew everybody in Coronado. You never locked your front door. Everybody,
Right.
Everybody knew everybody's phone number. The guy when I was a kid, I remember was the first it was Hemlock. Everything was Hemlock, HE5.
Right.
There was no 522s. There was no other.
So when you gave your phone number, you just gave the last 4 digits?
You only get exactly, because there was no other thing. So
Right.
it's like what's your phone number? Oh, 1926.
Right.
And you knew exactly. That was just 43. Started off as Hemlock, and they had to change that because that's poison. Then it was Hempstead. Then they went to pure digits.
Well, let's get into one of the biggest changes of Coronado then versus now is the Coronado Bridge, the Bay Bridge that went in 1969. And if you can, from a first-person perspective, tell us what were some of the concerns or critical conversations going on, or maybe everybody loved it and couldn't wait to have this bridge go in. But what was it like maybe a couple years prior to that getting built and actually being opened in '69?
There was overwhelming non-support for the bridge. The people who never got politically involved, like my parents who never usually got politically involved, they got involved on the bridge. I would say easily, and I might be understating this, 85% of the people in Coronado did not want the bridge.
Did not
Overwhelming opposition to
Wow.
the bridge.
And what were the biggest concerns? Like, why didn't they want it?
They didn't want their little paradise, to change. They didn't feel the need for that. I mean, it was the person who, of course, wanted the bridge was the owner of the Hotel Del.
Right.
And I know all the intimate stories on how this came. I mean, we took votes, and the vote was like overwhelmingly no. They took votes in San Diego. The vote was overwhelmingly no. The only reason why we got a bridge was because we had a very politically and very wealthy, powerful Larry Lawrence, and shouldn't name names, with Bert Forsyth,
Right.
of the Mexican Village, and one of the most popular and profitable restaurants on the planet
Right.
at the time. And some people at North Island, and a few other local business people that wanted more business. But by far, you have to understand, back then, Coronado was more like Mayberry than it is, like today, and nobody wanted it to change. And interestingly enough, I have relatives that live up in Bainbridge Island in Seattle.
Yep.
And anytime anybody talks about a bridge up there, they'll take you out and hang you in the back,
Right.
because they saw what happened down here, and it changed the character of things. So because the only reason why we got a bridge was because Pat Brown, the governor, had the power solely to put in a bridge, and he found a little loophole, and it's an interesting story. I got it directly from the state senator on how this happened, but it wasn't because the people wanted it, either in San Diego or here.
And was there an immediate impact to the bridge opening up? I mean, here comes Ronald Reagan, right? First person over the bridge, and is there an onslaught of traffic and people now, coming into Coronado? Was it a gradual over the first few years where there wasn't that big of a change? Like, if you lived on 3rd and 4th Avenue, did it overnight change into a highway?
It pretty much did, but I mean, was the overall impact that great right out of the chute? I mean, some people would argue that it was. I didn't think that it was that dramatic, but in a few short years, it became very dramatic. I mean, all of a sudden, you have all this traffic. All of a sudden, traffic lights start going in. All of a sudden, the reality is that it took a little bit of time for the word, to get out, and the word got out, and then people found, oh my gosh, we can take a bridge and get this incredible view and go over to this wonderful little island with this incredible, beach. I can recall an instance, and I believe it was February the 7th or 8th, 1972, and I was up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I was waiting for the racquetball court to open. And I remember looking up, and I could hear all the birds chirping, and it was one of those beautiful to die for, Coronado mornings, Southern California mornings. And I thought to myself, and I still remember this exact moment, I said, when are they all going to find out? When is the rest of the world going to discover this?
Right.
Well, they did,
Right.
like you did. And I mean, it's good to share,
Yep.
but Coronado is no longer the undiscovered gem. I'll give you a little tidbit. In 1969, you could buy a house cheaper in Coronado than you could in San Diego. I mean, a comparable house in a comparable neighborhood. It was cheap. It was cheaper over here.
Now, as someone who's, of course, always looking at homes, like all of us seem to be lately, or home prices, what are kind of some of those prices in the late 60s or 70s that just make my stomach turn now when I hear stories about it? What can you share?
I'll give you a few. Let me see. My family bought a lot. This is going to go way back. I think 1908. They bought a lot on Park Place for $1,500. And I actually have the paperwork for the construction loan, so they built the place for $2,900. So they had a total of $4,400, into it. I was born in a house on A Street that I think it was 17,000.
Wow.
They paid for it. But the most remarkable one, I think, is that I really grew up on the corner of 6th and A in this incredible house built by the founder of Walker Scott Department Stores. It's 6,100 square feet on a third of an acre. Anybody that grew up in the 60s and 70s in Coronado, because I come from a large family, knows this house.
Okay.
575 A Avenue. Everybody knows this house because we had parties back there, and they were legendary parties. And all you got to say is, the Johnson place, and everybody, will tell you about it. But we paid $41,000 for that house.
Wow.
And we then sold it in 1976 because all the kids, I had 12 brothers and sisters. So everybody was gone. You couldn't maintain it. It had a big giant swimming pool.
Right.
And we couldn't maintain it. And so we sold it, and at that time, it was the highest price that anybody had ever paid for a house in Coronado. It wasn't the most valuable house by far. I mean, you still had all the mansions, but just nothing. 76 was a still pretty dead market. Nothing had really, happened. And we happened to find a family that it fit them perfectly. And I still remember we got down to the end, and they were sitting there going, I can't believe we're paying $250,000 for a house. And at the same time, we were over there patting ourselves in the back saying, I can't believe anybody would pay us $250,000. We thought we were rich. I mean, we said, oh my God, that's incredible. I mean, today, even in today's market, it's worth absolute. I've been selling a second for $4 million.
Wow.
So we sold it for $250,000. It's now $4 million. We paid $41,000 for it.
Wow.